colleagues want to say anything? Brady?
Well, thank you, Chip. I'm glad to be here. I hadn't heard that from Hamas squad. I've heard the squad. I've been told them the Hamas squad. It's unbelievable that they would work for Americans, get elected by Americans, and not have American values. Unbelievable. But we are glad that President Biden is very busy. I'm told he has a rough schedule. He gets started around 9 a.m. and winds down at 6 p.m. so he can go to bed. I'm glad he's finally woke. Now, I'm not saying he's part of the woke group. I misunderstand that, but I'm glad he's finally woke up. After how many rockets? 3,500 rockets. How many rockets, Mr. President, would have to come across our border in the United States from our southern neighbor, our northern neighbor, off some ship on either coast? How many rockets would we have to take incoming before we would do something about it? You better believe Israel has the right to defend themselves. For him to call for a ceasefire, where was he when the first 1 or 2 rockets landed in Israel or toward Israel from Hamas? Where was he calling for a ceasefire back then? For the last 4 years under Trump, the relationship between Israel and Palestinians have been relatively calm. Now we see the recent attacks on Hamas. I think somebody said it, every time we get a new president, our enemies test him. Let me just tell you something. Biden gets a failing grade. He gets a failing grade. You might ask, in the first 4 months, this is happening. You might ask, what's changed in the first 4 months? Well, I'll tell you what hasn't. Some say that this has to do with the eviction of some Palestinians from 4 houses out of East Jerusalem. No, it's because they didn't pay their rent. It has nothing to do with their ethnicity or their religious preferences. Number 2, on April the 7th, President Biden announced the restoration of hundreds of million dollars to the Palestinian terrorist organization. What does he think they're going to do with that money? Does he really think they're going to build houses? They're going to put it in health care, build schools? No, they're going to put it in fighting Israel, sending in more rockets. Additionally, in February, President Biden removed the Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen's terrorist designation. How bad does somebody have to be to have a terrorist designation? They're killing people. They're terrorists, for Pete's sake. They strap dynamite on the chest of even young boys and send them in to kill people. And Biden removed their terrorist designation. Way to go, President Biden. These moves only serve to encourage Hamas. Unbelievable. As we know, Hamas is a terrorist organization that we would equate to ISIS or ISIL. Remember them? That's Hamas. That's Hamas. When Hamas, who behaves similarly to the Houthis, sees the U.S. remove the Houthis' terrorist designation with no requirements for straightening their act up. I mean, you know, like quit killing people. There's a novel thought. Straightening their act. They see the administration's mass funding cuts added back to the Palestinians. What do you think Hamas is going to say? There's a new sheriff in town or a new president. And then they're going to do anything they want. You've seen that in the first 4 months. Remember, Israel is a democracy. Israel is our greatest ally, as someone said earlier. Israel is what's keeping the powder keg over in the Middle East stable, somewhat stable. We must support Israel at all costs, period, bar none. They have the right to defend themselves. I just can't believe that they have as much restraint as they do. My gosh, I'm from Texas. If we were getting rockets from across the southern border, you've got to believe our great Texas DPS and our fighters there would be across that border within a matter of hours, if not minutes. Israel has the right to defend themselves. Biden's both sides de-escalation language, as he calls it, only fuels the violence coming from Hamas. It's just that simple. Did anyone call for de-escalation during the United States response to Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan after September 11th? Did anybody call for de-escalation? No, because we went after terrorists, we went after the enemies, and we demanded that they pay a price. And our great military, our great fighting men and women made them pay that price. I could go on and on and on. Hamas has a history of, and is currently hiding and fighting rockets. They hide behind houses. They put their base under a hospital, their headquarters. They hide behind women and children. They send rockets into Israel to kill women and children, and then they want to use women and children as their deflectors and their shields. People, it's high time that this stopped. If the Biden administration actually cared about the loss of life in Gaza and Israel, including the death of many children, many women, innocent civilians, then their positions should reflect that. Biden's policies actually perpetuate the poor, the stateless, and the oppressed condition Palestinians find themselves in. Biden should step up to the plate and take leadership like President Trump did. When President Trump was in office, you didn't see this. There was a reason. We had a strong president. Hamas doesn't want peace. Their only goal is the absolute destruction of Israel. They're backed by Iran, whose goal is not only the destruction of Israel, but who? Oh yeah, the United States of America. And we expect them to play fair with a ceasefire. Come on, President Biden, wake up. You may even have to work longer hours than 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm sorry. We must never forget whoever is in the White House. Israel is our greatest ally. Americans' policy should honor that relationship, not embolden Israel's mortal enemies, for Pete's sake. To prevent more Israeli and Palestinian deaths, President Biden needs to wake up, stop reversing successful policy, strict on the basis of what appears to be their hatred for Trump. Anything Trump stood for, they're against. Can you believe that? It's going to cost Israel lives, Palestinians lives, Hamas lives. It's just unbelievable. If he would not have such a hatred for Trump and would actually restore that policy, we could restore peace to the Middle East. I'm proud to stand with the state of Israel, defend the state of Israel. I can't tell you how important it is. I'm proud to be here, and I want to thank you for putting it on.